Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of A Wild Camper's Diary. The aim of this podcast is for me to offer you my thoughts on the world of wild camping, reflections and insight on my own experiences, and hopefully some inspiration along the way. Now, before we move on to today's episode, I want to start with a very big thank you to all of the lovely positive feedback that I've received since I launched the podcast last week. We had the pilot episode, episode 1, and I really appreciate the feedback that you have given me. I must give a special shout out to Laura, who, as a result of listening to the podcast, she says it was the final push that she needed to get out and do a little bit of solo wild camping. So that is really pleasing to hear, and I hope you had a great wild camp, Laura. So, episode 2, which I have decided to call I Hate Hot and Sweaty Tents, the pros and cons of summer wild camping. As many of you know, I live in London, I'm based in the UK, and in the UK we have 4 very distinct seasons. It's not like other countries in the world where there are 2 seasons. There's like a hot season and a rainy season. We do have 4 distinct seasons, and I like to wild camp in each of those seasons. But if I'm going to be completely honest with you, I would say that summer is my least favourite season to wild camp in. Now, that might be different for you. You might actually enjoy summer wild camping. Now, currently in the UK, we're experiencing some pretty high temperatures, particularly here in the southeast. So we have hit 31 degrees Celsius today. It is predicted to go up into the mid-30s by the end of the week. We could be looking at 34, 35 degrees, which for us here is very, very warm. So then that begs the question, should you go out camping in those temperatures? And it just kind of got me thinking about what are actually the pros and the cons of summer wild camping. I suppose the first pro that comes to my mind is the fact that you get a lot more daylight. So we get very, very long days. So at the moment, we get sunrise before 5 o'clock in the morning, and then sunset is around 9:30-ish at night, maybe even a little bit later. So you get really long days, lots of sunlight, which is obviously very useful, especially if you're hiking or you need extra time to put up shelters or sound out where you're going to camp or whatever. The other advantage, the other pro that I see is that you can travel light, and I've experienced this a number of times, that joy of not having to take 1,000 items, but being able to pack a rucksack fairly lightly with the essentials that you need, but nowhere near as much as you would need, obviously, going out on a winter or even an autumn camp here in the UK or maybe in another country. The other pro is the glorious sunrises and sunsets that you get to see, the landscapes, the way the light hits the landscapes, and the fact that you can just enjoy, whatever floats your boat. Is it mountains? Is it rivers? Is it fields? Is it the coast? The summer adds so much to that, doesn't it? I can think of a camp I went on a year or 2 ago, and it was a summer camp actually, even though I said I'm not a fan. But this one was just really, really special, and I think it can be, if you get a nice breeze and the conditions are right. It can be absolutely fabulous, and I really enjoyed just staying up late at night and just enjoying the sunrise and the sounds of nature. It was a very, very special wild camp, and I would actually rate it as one of my all-time favourites. My next pro that I've got for you is clothing. The fact that you don't have to wear lots of clobber. You haven't got to have tons of layers and thick socks and clunky hiking boots or whatever. You can actually travel pretty lightly. Obviously there are sensible choices to be made around clothing in terms of non-cotton or non 100% cotton clothing that can enable you to dry out more quickly, but I really like the fact that you don't have to have loads of layers on. Another thing, I don't tend to do it myself, but I've got several friends that like to wild swim, who like to get out on the water, and that's obviously a lot easier to do in the summer. I've actually, and if you follow my YouTube channel, Londoner Outdoors, you'll see that I've just invested in a kayak, and I went out into the local canals of London to do some kayaking just yesterday actually, and I'm starting to think about whether I can combine that with some wild camping. So I guess the summer does provide you with that opportunity, doesn't it, to be able to combine your getting out on the water and maybe swimming and those sorts of things, just to really add to your outdoors experience. So then we come on to the cons. What are the cons? I think the number one con for me, which makes it my least favourite season, is the temperatures, especially high temperatures. I think I can cope if it's sort of in the sort of low to mid 20s. That's the optimum sort of camping temperature for the summer for me, I would say. As soon as you start pushing up to sort of 28, 29, 30 degrees, maybe even more than that, getting into the mid 30s, for me, it just becomes a bit too much. And I start to enjoy the experience a lot less. You know, I mean, you get sweaty, you can't, you're reluctant to sort of move around a lot. You've really got to focus on staying in the shade, not getting burnt, especially if you're me. You've got to be careful about not using up too much energy, sweating out all of those fluids that you're putting into your body, losing important body salts. You've got to really think about water, haven't you? You've got to make sure, I think you've got to think about where you're going, the location, and with that, think about, how much water do I need to take? You probably need to take a lot more, especially if you're not going to be near a water source. Is that water source going to be okay? Just things to think about. The other one, and a big one, is bugs, the dreaded midges and the mozzies that like to feast on us, don't they, in the summer months? And they do like the taste of some of us a bit more than others. And I've experienced that a little bit this weekend when I went out on my kayak, and I rather stupidly forgot to put insect repellent on my legs, and they had a field day, and I'm really paying the price today. Bugs can be a problem, but there are ways, obviously, of getting around that. There are repellents, there are gadgets, there are places that you shouldn't go, there are places that you can go. Bugs is on my list of cons. The next con that I have for you is waiting for the public to leave. So on my YouTube channel and a lot of friends in the wild camping community, we talk about arriving late and leaving early. Pitch late, leave early, which I think is easier, in other seasons. But when you're in the summer and it's sort of 9:30, 10 o'clock at night here in the UK, and you still have families traipsing around the countryside, hanging around on cliffs, and you just want them to go home so you can just have the place to yourself. I know that sounds incredibly selfish, but you know what I mean? You just want to have the place to yourself. You don't want any bother. You just want to get on with it, don't you? You just want to set up your shelter. But I suppose on the flip side of that, you can just chill and relax and just enjoy the scenery, enjoy the weather, and I guess you just have to be patient, really, don't you? My final con for you is the hot and sweaty nights, especially if you are in a tent. And I have learnt the hard way that being in a tent on a hot night in the southeast of England is not a good move unless it is very well ventilated or you have some kind of setup that provides decent ventilation. It can ruin your camping experience. And I can think of several experiences where it has really dampened the mood, shall we say, and I've not slept well. I really haven't slept well. So I think that is something to really consider if you are doing summer camping and you're doing it in the UK. Just to be mindful of your shelter. Is it really worth it, or actually is it worth saving a few more pennies and investing in a shelter with better ventilation, or a hammock, or a better bug net, or whatever it is that's going to make the experience more bearable and more enjoyable. So there we go, the pros and the cons of summer wild camping. I was actually going to be talking about something else for episode 2, but bearing in mind the change of weather that we've had here in the UK, I kind of changed my mind, so I felt this would be a little bit more topical. What are your thoughts? Maybe summer camping is your go-to season. Maybe that's just what you like to do. Maybe it is all about the kit. and just making the right choices, or maybe you just like to just miss the summer completely and wait till you get to autumn and you can just have that slightly cooler experience. Thank you very much for listening. Really appreciate it. As always, if you have the opportunity to leave any kind of comment or review on the platform that you're listening on, that is very much appreciated. And I hopefully will see you again for episode 3 of A Wild Camper's Diary.